This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Do you think Vancouver is a miserable sports city?
As a Canucks fan, my instinct says yes. Funny you should ask that, because I actually asked the exact same question to hockey fans ahead of a game in downtown Vancouver, and here is what they had to say.
I would say we're not necessarily the most miserable, but we're sort of flaky.
Have they met a Leafs fan?
We don't really have many sports, and the sports we do have, we suck at.
I would say that we're not. I feel like we're pretty hyped, especially with the last Blue Jays game. Like, I feel like we all got together and we're united for Canada.
I think they haven't been to Toronto. I think Toronto might be a little more miserable.
The city's buzzing when the Canucks are doing well, but when the Canucks don't do well, it's dead.
You're listening to the 604 Sideline. I'm Graciela Cruz Flores.
And I'm Arden McLeod.
And today we'll be talking about Vancouver as a quote-unquote major sports city. So you just said that you didn't think that Vancouver is a miserable, or you do think that Vancouver is a miserable sports city.
Well, I think as someone who really just follows the Canucks, which is the only major league in Vancouver, it does feel like it can be miserable just because we're so non-competitive.
Yeah, that's totally fair in that sense. I feel like with the Canucks, we've been on a roller coaster, but the city has a lot to look up to as of now. I think we got the Vancouver Rise, who are going for the first time in their first season to their championship final. Then we have the PWHL that's starting in about a couple weeks on November 21st, which is exciting. So we got, women's sports coming up. So that's always interesting to watch. And the Whitecaps, they're in the playoffs, which is great because of the signing of Thomas Mueller earlier this season.
Yeah, I noticed that actually when Mueller came on board to the Whitecaps, that the interest in that team really took off, and that's what makes me hesitant to label Vancouver as a miserable sports city, because they do get behind their teams and they are very passionate as a fan base.
Later on in this chatcast, we'll speak to you about the environment and the passion that Vancouver holds and the ambitions that the city holds to continue enlarging the market.
So who did you talk to about what it's like being a sports fan in Vancouver?
So I got Oscar Ho, who is I would say a sports personality in the sports industry of Vancouver. He works in a lot of facets of the industry itself.
I think given the population size of Vancouver, our sports appetite is pretty healthy. Vancouver is known across North America as a very recreational-based city. Recreational sports such as skiing, hiking, climbing. But I think in terms of professional sports, we also do quite well. I mean, the big team, obviously, as you mentioned, is the Canucks. And we also have a couple other smaller professional teams as well, Whitecaps, as well as for example, the Canadians for baseball. So we do have a quite healthy professional sports appetite, I'd say, given our population size.
Interesting. I'm interested to learn from someone who has more experience with all the leagues that are hosted in Vancouver, because I just have my experience with the NHL. I actually talked to an economist at Concordia University, Moshe Lander, who specializes in sports, and he was able to shed some light on what makes Vancouver different and why major leagues might not be the best fit here.
Well, I think that's the only case of failure was the Grizzlies. The Canucks have been there for over 50 years, and you've had the Lions for decades as one of the few successful franchises in the CFL. So, you're really talking about one failing franchise, and probably the biggest thing that worked against it was that on the court they stunk, partly because of the rules of the NBA that worked against expansion franchises, but just partly because it was fundamentally mismanaged. Beyond that, it's an extremely successful city when it comes to professional sports.
It's funny to me that Lander mentioned the Grizzlies being the only failure in Vancouver, because when I was a baby, I would go to those games all the time with my family. And he mentioned that it really stems from mismanagement and, again, just having butts in seats. And we weren't able to get that when the Grizzlies were in Vancouver. So it's sad to see, but I can see those underlying factors really playing a part in the NHL being the only major league sports team here with the Canucks. But does that really make it a non-major sports city?
No, I don't think that doesn't make Vancouver a major sports city. I'm just going to put into perspective of what the sports market looks like for Vancouver. So if we're talking major leagues, are going to be the MLS and the NHL. NHL obviously a little higher than the MLS. So we got the Vancouver Canucks and the Whitecaps. Now, the sports market with those two combined come to $657.8 million according to IBIS World. Now, compared to, for example, Toronto, that have the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, Blue Jays, and Toronto FC, which are all big major leagues, their worth right now is $1.8 billion according to IBIS World. So we're a smaller market. I still think that we're still growing. Like that's still growing. Once the PWHL establishes itself, that's going to bring a whole lot of revenue. The more we start bringing in winning acceptable teams is what I think will start making the market grow and grow more in Vancouver.
That's really exciting to me because we're getting in early on a league that could be huge. And it reminds me of something that Lander said in our discussion, where he doesn't see any major league sports really like the NBA or the MLB coming to Vancouver. A lot of that has to do with our proximity to Seattle, and Seattle is just a better fit for those markets because of the US dollar currency. It's just a more natural fit. But he did mention that if another major league were to come here, the WNBA might actually be a good fit.
I mean, that's kind of interesting, and that'd be exciting as well if we start bringing that in. And if we get successful with the WNBA, I mean, Oscar Ho also mentioned that he could see that in the next decade or two, we can bring back the NBA.
Interesting thing about Vancouver is that it is much more family-based than a lot of the other cities. So, for example, if you go to Toronto, Chicago, or Boston, they're much more commercial-based. So, like, corporate side represents a lot of their sales. Whereas a city like Vancouver, which is much more family-based, really relies on that, family experience to leverage in those crowds.
You had earlier mentioned that you went to the Grizzlies games as a kid a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, Ho saying that Vancouver is a lot more family-based. I could see that. I could honestly see both sides, but as a really young kid, there was one season that I went to the Grizzlies games like once a week with my family because I was just so obsessed with basketball at that time. It was just really accessible for my mom to get tickets. Ever since they left, we didn't really go to sporting events as a family because I wasn't really a fan of watching soccer, which was the sport that I played, and I hadn't gotten into hockey just yet.
I actually went to the Miami Whitecaps game when Messi came in, and I bought those tickets at 55. Lower bowl. We're talking, this was going to be like the game of the century in Vancouver. And then I also last month in October went to the Canucks game against the Rangers, and that was also lower bowl. We're saying that it was starting at 150 and I got the tickets at 157. There were some tickets selling for 300, so definitely less accessible than a Whitecaps ticket or a Lions ticket or a Warriors ticket. And so you're gonna see a lot more families going into those team games because of the accessibility and affordability.
A lot of the expenses are in US dollars. but revenues are in Canadian dollars. And so it's this mismatch that poses a bit of a problem. Of the 4 major professional sports leagues, the NHL is the most reliant on ticket sales and game day revenue. When the NHL creates a salary cap, minimum and maximum, saying that you got to spend somewhere in, let's say, the $60 million range US, that translates to about $90 million Canadian. So the Canucks then, if they want to just break even, need to figure out how to generate at least $90 million worth of revenue over 40 home games. And so when you start doing the math, you start realizing that tickets are pretty pricey then.
Based off your conversation with Lander, how do you feel about the sports market in Vancouver growing in the future?
I think one thing is clear from that conversation is that there's not enough space in Vancouver to build dedicated facilities and maybe a sports-specific facility, like, say, for the Whitecaps to have their own arena.
A lot of these teams in the U.S. actually own their own facilities, have their own stadiums, whereas right now, for example, Canucks lease Rogers, I believe, and also the Whitecaps lease out BC Place. You know, in terms of cash flow and revenue that are left the club, like they're not with the club, so to speak. Yeah, if these clubs can take more ownership of this revenue stream, then that would hopefully help growth.
I think that the future really looks brighter if we look outwards at Metro Vancouver and we start to build dedicated facilities out in those cities like Surrey, Burnaby, and Richmond.
Vancouver has sprawled so much. You don't have to have the practice facility even in Vancouver proper. You can go into any one of the suburbs and plenty of teams will have their practice facilities located away from the main arena. If you're looking for something a little closer, then the reality is that Vancouver is kind of full. There's just not a lot of land, and the land that's there is extremely expensive.
And as long as we find the people who are passionate enough to keep these teams afloat, and either that be the families that are going to go see the teams, the passion, and or the deep pockets that we will be searching for in the future, I think that Vancouver as a sports city will forever be a major sports city.
This has been the 604 Sideline. I'm Arden McLeod.
And I'm Graciela Cruz Flores. Thank you for tuning in.